Welcome back to the greenhouse. We're out at the little greenhouse. I was coming out here to check on all of the starts we've got going. It's a little chilly outside yet. We're sitting about 33, 34 degrees Fahrenheit outside, sitting about 65, 66. It was about 65. I keep opening the door, coming in and out because I was setting a few things up. I want to talk about taking cuttings and how easy it is to take cuttings. But I was actually coming out here in the first place just to do a little work, and I was throwing some snow down in all the plants that are actually in the ground. I dropped a little bit in my tomatoes here. Got whole tons of tomatoes, all of my tatsoi back there, and just lots and lots of little sprouts of lettuce. So I wanted to throw some nitrogen and free moisture from all of that snow we got outside and just kind of let that melt up because it's warm in here today. So we've got all of this aquaponics water over top of our reservoir down here, our actual John Payne heating system. Now this water is not actually cold at all. It's probably about the same temp, about 65, maybe 70. Now, I wanted to get a jump start on all of the spring stuff. I've got a bunch of little kind of starts here. I've got oregano and mint, a whole bunch of little things that don't look like much, but this whole thing will just poof out and be full of life in about a week or two if we have any amount of sun, and we do not have any solar activity today. And you can see that our little fan is running, our water's slowly running, and we have water in here, and it will slowly bilge down our little bell siphon and then continually cycle, and it will help all of these plants root up. Like this mint right here has been in here for a few days, and you can see that it was pretty well brown, and it's starting to throw off little tiny baby new roots on there. Just kind of wiggle that back into the rocks and water, and that is a very easy way to get some propagations and get free plants. So after about 2-3 weeks of our John Payne compost heating being set up and running again, like I shared in the one video where I reallocated the whole pile, got it warm again, and then basically just used that heat to sprout all of these plants in here. You can see how well everything is doing. I brought a few plants outside that I've kept alive for years. I got a tree trunk of a rosemary in there. It's got bark on it. I've got this little mini rose bush. This is what we're going to be propagating on today. Also got my fig here. I have a fig tree, more tomatoes, and I've got another method of planting. So as we're filling our greenhouses up, this little greenhouse, we've basically run out of room in here. Everything's pretty well taken up as far as shelf space and floor space. So even our aquaponics is out already. So the winter hasn't been too bad to us. I've got my water out here, got a little bit of added heat to the water. So I'm gonna see how well that works together for the next week or two. Hopefully that pile stays active for another couple weeks on me. When we're planting, we're not always planting seeds. Today we're gonna be taking some cuttings, but this is one little simple way. This is a bunch of arugula right here. Now I've got maybe 100 plants that I'll be able to soak in water and take all of these apart, and I should have a good success rate once transplanted. I can pot these up or transplant them out somewhere into the greenhouse or something like that. But we've got a lot of good food right here, and it was easy to grow, and it saved a lot of space starting all of these in this little pot here. All right, so on to taking the actual cuttings here. I've got this rose bush, the mini rose. I've got a little sliver of a cutting from my rosemary over there, and I just pulled that right out. That was a fresh cutting. I'm just gonna stick that little guy right into the soil here and pinch it in, and I'll water that in. So that is a very, very simple cutting. All I did was pinch it off, strip it down, throw all the leaves down at the base, and basically just stick it right into the aloe, and it's ready to go. You can see that little bit of yellowish secretion there. Now that is actually yellow latex, and that can be kind of irritating to our skin, but yet we use it for burns and stuff like that. It has many healing properties. If you're using aloe, be careful not to get it on your eyes. And I have this fig tree cutting in here. It was just plugged right in, so this came off of like one of our little Chicago hardy fig. Taking this cutting, and I'm just going to stick this one right into the soil. That one is basically done too. Those were pre-made ready cuttings. I'm going to take a few cuttings from our actual rose bush here, but I want to talk about a few things first. So when you're rooting with aloe and you hear aloe vera as a rooting hormone, technically it's not a rooting hormone. It's not acting as a hormone, it's acting as a protectant. It's going to protect your actual cutting from protozoan, bacteria, and pathogens that want to actually rot and eat your wood and break it down. So we're protecting our cuttings when we're sticking them in the soil. We don't really use aloe when we're sticking cuttings into water. So that's the major difference on this, and that's why we're using the actual aloe vera as the actual hormone itself to stimulate root growth. But technically it's just aiding in protecting the plant and letting it do its natural cycle by rooting its own self. So outside we see a 50 to 60% success rating on all of our cuttings that we put in soil, and we try and get a good success rate no matter what. We get about a 50, 60, maybe 65% rate on all of the cuttings we do. So when we're doing it like this in here in a protected environment, we have our shade cloth up to prevent from overheating, and all of these baby plants need to be protected and need filtered sunlight to get started and to have a good start at life without being burnt up and being stunted on their initial growth when it's chilly at night and then they get baked all day long. So I had to basically put my shade cloth up, and it's very early in the season to do that, but I'm finding it necessary to protect all my plants and to get the best environment for these cuttings as well. So the aloe has antibacterial and antifungal properties that is going to allow your cutting to get to the stage where it's fully rooted up and you can transplant it. So I mentioned planting into water. So our water is flowing and it's constantly moving, and it's got the ebb and flow of a natural system because it's filling and the bell siphon's draining it. If you have stagnant water, that is a very bad situation to get your cuttings rooted up. So you want to have flowing, fresh, clean water or bubbling water. Any way you can flow that water around or refresh it is going to aid in the development and prevent any negative growth of any algae, bacteria, or any type of funguses or protozoan that are living in your water. So to give yourself the best chance at having successful cuttings, you don't want to have direct sunlight because it can very quickly burn or dry up your actual cutting, and they need to be very wet and damp most of the time, and misting them is a very good alternative to keeping them moist all the time, but that takes a lot of work. So if you can keep them in a damp area or in a humid environment with decent airflow so they're not going to get too stagnated, you will have good success. Next thing to consider is the medium that you're actually going to root into. We use like a fine coconut core and a mix of a whole bunch of cheap soils. We're looking to mix all of our soils together for a lump quantity, and we want a nice sterile, light, well-drained soil. So you want to have all those good properties to your soil before you actually start, to give yourself the best chance at those cuttings actually rooting up into that medium for you. One last thing to account for is your rooting size, your fully developed root size. So in 2 weeks to a month, this fig tree will be way expanded past this, and it's probably not going to be in that little cup that long. And that rosemary will be in there for a month and it will just barely be poking out. So anything I put in here is not going to really exceed this 2x2 cell by 2 inches deep. So I'll be able to transplant those in plenty of time. I won't have to worry about them drying out or exceeding the space that they were rooted into. So now that I touched on all of the best ways to get success, let's actually talk about taking our cuttings here. I'm gonna kind of take a large cutting and split it into some smaller cuttings here. So I've got this. I'm just going to take that little cutting off, and now I am going to actually take this, and we just divided that little Y branch there, and we've got a decent little area to grow on. We've got maybe like 2-3 nodes I'll be able to put underneath the soil. So we're going to come by and we're going to cut all of those branches off, and we're going to damage all of those leaves, basically all the way down to fresh leaves. So this is exactly what our cutting looks like, about 3 inches long. You can see where I have taken a cutting from it in the past. I'm going to take the little piece of aloe and we will dip our little rose cutting in there, and we're just going to stick it right in. And as long as we've got some protected nodes underneath the soil, we should have good success within a couple weeks. So we've got this other cutting here. I'm just going to show how much damage I actually do to the leaves. Now this is a very small cutting, but I do have a node that I will grow roots from, I believe. So we're going to take this little guy, stick it right in the aloe, get the juice on there, nice and protected, and we're just going to prop it right in there. Now I'll go around and I will be able to take and fill all of these little cells just from this one little bush here, and this is enough to make maybe 3, 4, even 5 cuttings from it. And I'm about 80 to 90% sure that we will have an 80 to 90% success rate with these cuttings once I fill all of these out. So I really wanted to touch on that and talk about why the aloe is used and why we've religiously used aloe. That's all I ever root with. I don't ever use any hormones or chemicals or anything like that. It's either aloe vera or water. So very, very good success rates, and we have a ton of plants that we produce for free. I mean, we can take a big bush like this and turn it into 1,000 plants. So it's rather lucrative to be able to multiply all of these plants without having to wait for that process of germination and growth to maturity. So I hope everybody found something from this video and found it useful. So I'd like to thank everybody for watching this and coming to check this out. I've got to finish taking all these cuttings here, and I'll see you guys next time.